And this is part of the culture where, the mother and father, or sometimes just the father is working, mother is at home, but the nanny is taking care of the child. The nanny is raising the child. So, sometimes, often people joke that, the child becomes bilingual at a young age because the nanny is normally, she speaks Spanish or something, and she speaks another language, French. So the child becomes bilingual, right? So speaks English as well as Spanish. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the people of Makkah, they would send their kids to the desert. And this was something that only the Quraysh, because they were a tribe that was a noble tribe. So they were a noble and elite tribe. And the reason why they did it was they wanted the child to be raised in a pure and healthy environment. So in a pure and healthy environment, this is something that's found only in the desert. Now what's the reasoning behind this? I mean, if you look at it, in those days, the infant mortality rate was very high, right? People were subjected to many types of diseases. So one way to preserve the child was to take the child away from congregations, right? Because what was the biggest congregation that was taking place in Makkah? The Hajj was the biggest congregation. So obviously, it stands to reason that people are going to come for Hajj. They're going to get sick, right? And this sickness is going to affect these children. So they wanted to preserve their children. So they would send their children to the desert. Okay? And this would also build the stamina of the child. And the child would adjust to the rough life that is waiting for them in Makkah. And there's places still like this, where people live in the desert throughout their entire life. One of my friends, he went to Mauritania for his studies. Mauritania is a very harsh climate, very difficult place to study. So there is no such thing as buildings. So this is on the western part of Africa, Mauritania. And people are still living in the desert. So there's a city called Nouakchott. Nouakchott is a city in Mauritania. This is a city. And there are scholars who are residing there, but majority of the people who study, one of my friends who studied there for approximately almost a year. So anybody has heard of the name Hamza Yusuf, right? He also studied there. Hamza Yusuf from California, he also studied in Mauritania, right? So he went to this isolated place, a desert area, and he studied there. And what they're studying is tents. They're studying in tents, and not the tents that you and I, go to Dick's Sporting Goods and we purchase a Coleman tent. It doesn't work like that. Their tents are very roughly made, and they're made from animal skins. So, and they need to protect themselves from the animals because they're wild animals in the desert. So they'll make little spikes. They'll have a perimeter. They'll make spikes so that animals don't get in. So people are staying in this small desert type area. So a close friend of mine, who I've known for quite a number of years, he went there for his studies, after which he went to Pakistan and completed his studies. But initially, he went over there. So he was telling me that the air over there is very pure, and people live to a long age. One of the scholars who passed away last year, and this was also Sheikh Hamza Yusuf's teacher. His name was Sheikh Murabitul Hajj. Sheikh Murabitul Hajj, a very exemplary scholar, an amazing scholar. So when Sheikh Hamza Yusuf went to him, there's a long story that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf mentioned to us. When I was a student in England, he delivered a speech. We don't have much time to go into the story of how he ended up in Mauritania. But when the caliphate fell in 1924, he was in his teens on his way to Hajj. So he passed away in 2018, right? Which means that if the caliphate fell in 1924 and he was in his teens, let's say 17, 18, while he was on his way to Hajj, you have about 115? About 115 years, you have, approximately. So he was 115 years old. And currently, he passed away, so right now, the chair of Hadith and Fiqh is occupied by his eldest son, who's I think 90, he's in his 90s now. Right? So he just hit 90. They would get married very young. So he just hit 90. So the people over there, alhamdulillah, they're very healthy. Very healthy. Another one of my friends, he did a whole video recording on Mauritania. He was in Mauritania for about 7 days, and he did an entire video recording, visited many scholars, and the only ailment they have is weak bones. That's the only ailment they have. And these people are living on less than $1 a day. So less than $1 a day, this is what they're living on. And there's no such thing as meat. So it's not like meat is commonly found over there. So they're living on vegetables. They're living a semi-vegetarian diet. Meat in madrasa, in that region, it's not called madrasa, a place of learning. It's called mahdara, a place where you present yourself, which is essentially the same thing. Right? You're going to a place to present yourself and you're going to learn the disciplines, the various Islamic disciplines. So meat is something that is unheard of over there. However, when they finish a book, right? So this calls for a walima. So they would do a walima, right? When you finish a book. So walima is not just restricted to weddings and stuff. So they do walima even when you finish a book. So you finish a book, let's say something like Bukhari or Muslim, or any book on jurisprudence. Then they would hold a walima. So they would get one of those, desi goats or something, or a lamb. They would slaughter it and they would roast the entire thing, and then they would serve it. So this is desert life. This was how people lived many years ago, and this was how the Prophet ﷺ lived when he was living in the desert. So the child adjusts to a rough life in the desert, and this was another reason why Rasulullah ﷺ was, or the wisdom I should say, why Rasulullah ﷺ went into the desert, and how he became the personality that he became. Another thing is that the child that is born in an impoverished area is just as content as a child that is born in affluence. So when a child is born in an impoverished area, then that child, you'll see that he's content, he's happy, and he's just as happy as a child who is born in an affluent area. We see this throughout the world. The children born over here, alhamdulillah, they are born in affluence. And children that are born in places that are impoverished, the children over there are very content. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was born in an environment that was impoverished, an impoverished environment. This built the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The children, regardless, even though they may be impoverished, they have fun. They have fun nonetheless. And so it's very unlike kids today where, for fun, they need the iPad, they need different type of gaming systems, they need as much, hand-eye coordination stimuli as much as possible. And unfortunately, this is how kids are raised today, where they're constantly sitting in front of a screen. So I'm sure, you go a generation back, kids are playing outside. Kids are going outside, they're coming back at Maghrib time. So they're playing throughout the entire day, coming back at Maghrib time. I know when I was growing up in the city, I was living in Flushing. I would go out in the morning and come back at Maghrib time. And this was the habit. We rarely played. At that time there was Nintendo and Genesis and all of that stuff, but it wasn't as if we were spending the entire day in front of the TV. Eventually a person got tired and just went out and did things. So this was what people were doing a generation back, very unlike the generation today where kids are constantly, just pressing buttons on the iPad. Right? So this is very unhealthy and a very unhealthy way to live. This habit of the Quraysh also shows that they had long-term plans for their kids. They wanted their kids to survive. They wanted their kids to come back and contribute something to the society, contribute something to the family. So they grew up and they became accustomed to the life that was waiting for them in Makkah. So the desert life, it was a very harsh life. It was a very rough life. But kids, when they grow up in that kind of environment, they become used to it. They become accustomed. And sometimes we might think, and we might ask ourselves, that, how are they living? And this is a valid question. When we go back to our countries, we see that kids, they're not living like the kids were living over here. And sometimes we may ask ourselves, how are they living like this? A child grows up in that kind of environment, they become used to it. They become accustomed to that environment. And Makkah life was very rough. It was a very rough life. Very few people were affluent. So it was a very rough life that was waiting for them in Makkah. But once they returned to Makkah, they were accustomed and they were used to that life. Another reason is that when you're living with close family members, then what happens? What happens when you're living with close family members? Family members, they pamper you, right? And who pampers you the most? The grandfather and the grandmother. The grandfather and grandmother, they're the ones who pamper the most, their grandkids. So by sending them to the desert, right, this would avoid the pampering from other relatives. This was another reason. So grandparents, they spoil children, right? Uncles, aunts spoil children. When we go, right, if we went to our aunt's home or uncle's home when we were young, right, it's not like the rules that we find in our homes apply in the homes of our uncles and aunts. They show us special consideration, special favor. Same thing when we go into our grandparents' home. The rules that we have at home don't necessarily apply over there. It's like no holds barred. You do whatever you want. This is your home. Right? This is the response that we get from our grandparents. That jo bhi karna ho kare. And whatever you want to do, you do. And we're not going to stop you. You are our son. You are our daughter. So this was another reason why the Quraysh, they would send their kids to the desert. They didn't want their kids to be pampered by the immediate family members. They didn't want them to get spoiled. Right? So they would send them to the desert. So the desert was a very disciplined type environment. It was away from the family. You're with a strange family completely. Right? And a strange family is not going to take care of you similar to how your immediate family takes care of you. So these people, they were away from their family. It's a very disciplined environment that they were living in. And one of the primary reasons why the Quraysh would send their kids, everybody knows this, one of the primary reasons why the Quraysh would send their kids to the desert was so that fluency in Arabic, so that Arabic language remains preserved. Right? The absolute the literature, the eloquence of the Arabic language, it remains preserved. Because what happens in the city? The city is a place of what? Trading, right? People are coming to the city, they're trading. You have the Yemeni people coming, you have the Syrian people coming, you have different people visiting Makkah. This is a hub, right? This is a hub. This is a place where Hujjaj are coming. So what happens? Although they're speaking Arabic, what happens? You have different words being introduced into the Arabic language. So that corrupts the language. So the Quraysh, they wanted their kids to speak the pure Arabic dialect, which is undiluted. So it should be pure and undiluted. And this is a phenomenon we see even today in our languages. Person speaks Urdu, person speaks Arabic. In Arabic today, you pick up an Arabic newspaper, right? So there are quite a number of loan words from other languages. You pick up any Arabic newspaper, so many loan words from other languages. Similarly in Urdu, there's so many loan words from English. Sometimes I'm reading Urdu, I'm trying to figure out what is this word. Lo and behold, it's an English word, right? Like testament or something. I'm like, what is this? You have the day and the ya and the sin. I'm trying to figure out what does this mean? And then this means testament. Testament, so it's a loan word from English. Similarly in Arabic, there were many loan words. So there were loan words in Arabic, and they didn't want these traders to corrupt the Qurashi dialect. So the Quraysh, they would send their kids to the desert for the sole purpose that the language is preserved. So this was the epitome, the height of language. The height of language. At that time, this era, this is considered the height of the Arabic language, the pinnacle of the Arabic language. It's similar to like the Elizabethan period. The Elizabethan period in England, where English was at its pinnacle, English was at its height. Right? And Shakespeare was coming up with these sonnets and plays. So this was Arabic in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Arabic was at its pinnacle, the Arabic was at its height. So this was the pure Arabic, and they were well known for the purity in the language, was the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. And Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr, this was the tribe that, or rather one of the members of the tribe that took care of the Prophet ﷺ. The tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. Okay? But this is a very important tribe to keep in mind. So, just to elaborate a little bit, one of the Sahaba, they inquired from the Prophet ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah, tell us about your childhood. Tell us about yourself. So Rasulullah ﷺ said that, Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim. That I am the dua that my father Ibrahim a.s. made. What was the dua that Ibrahim a.s. made? Rabbana wab'ath fihim rasulan. That, O Allah, O our Lord, wab'ath fihim rasulan. You send a prophet to these people. You send a prophet to these people so that this prophet, he may teach them, he may do tilawah of the Quran, and he may purify them. So this was the result. Rasulullah ﷺ was the answer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. وَبُشْرَى أَخِي Isa. And I am the glad tidings of my brother Isa alayhi salam. Isa alayhi salam min ba'd ismuhu Ahmad. Isa alayhi salam prophesied the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is mentioned in the Quran. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَاسْتَرْضَعْتُ فِي بَنِي سَعْدِ ibn Abi Bakr. وَاسْتَرْضَعْتُ فِي بَنِي سَعْدِ ibn Abi Bakr. And that I was fostered. I was fostered by the tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. So they were the ones who were the foster parents. The foster mother and the foster father and the foster sister and brother, they were from this tribe of Banu Sa'ad bin Abi Bakr. And they were known, Banu Sa'ad, they were known for taking care of the Qurashi kids. This tribe was known for taking care of the Qurashi kids and for speaking the correct Arabic, for speaking the pure Qurashi dialect. I mean, they were just the epitome of language, the height of the Arabic language, Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr. So we know the story of Halima, but I'm going to recount it and we're going to summarize a few things. So she narrates a hadith. This is one of the hadiths that Halima, the foster mother of the Prophet ﷺ, narrates. And this hadith is authentic. So it's not as if this is an inauthentic hadith. This is an authentic hadith. So she says that we were impoverished and we were suffering. So we didn't have much. We were impoverished, we were suffering, and the desert dwellers, one of the reasons why they wanted kids was what? Money, right? Because they would get money. They would take a kid from Makkah, and the parents would pay these individuals. Why? Because they were taking care of the kids, and these people, they wanted money. So, and this was only reserved for the noble families of the Quraysh. So only the noble families of the Quraysh, they were the ones who would give their kids to the tribe of Banu Sa'ad. And they, as I said, they were desert dwellers. So they would come into the city looking for kids to take back with them, to take care of them, and to make some money. So Halima said that I just had a child myself, and we were suffering from poverty. My family was suffering from poverty. She had a daughter who was approximately 7-8 years of age. And her name was Shema. Her name was Shema. And she also had a newborn son. This stands to reason that for her to take the Prophet ﷺ, you have to have milk. So she had given birth. And I tried looking. I couldn't find the name of this newborn son. This is not mentioned in any of the Seerah books. So I couldn't find in any of the classical Seerah works the name of the son. But nonetheless, she did have a son. The name, thus far, I have not been able to find it, is unknown. So she goes with a group of mothers, of course. So every year, they would, a group of mothers, they would go to Makkah. They would travel to Makkah, right, obviously. And they would search for kids. They would ask around that, okay, which of the Qurashi nobles, which of them have had a child? Is there any children? So she goes with a group of mothers, and all of them hear about an orphan. They all hear about an orphan. But this is an orphan, and they know that, okay, if he's an orphan, they're not going to get enough money. Now, Abdul Muttalib, we know about Abdul Muttalib that he was the star of the Quraysh. Right? He was a very wealthy man, a very affluent man, and he was a chief. But you have to understand that Abdul Muttalib himself had approximately 10 sons. Abdul Muttalib had 10 sons and 5 daughters. So Abdul Muttalib had his own big family to take care of and many grandchildren. Abdul Muttalib. So he had a very large family, so it was not possible for Abdul Muttalib to pay for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they continued this for a week, where they're asking around, they're making they're coming up with terms. Right? So they had a contract, they would come up with terms, and when the week was finished, every one of Halima radiallahu ta'ala anha's friends, she had accepted Islam. So later on in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, so every one of her friends, they acquired a child except her. She didn't acquire a child by the end of the week. So she feels ashamed, and she consults with her husband that, I came here for a child. Right? I want a child. So the husband says, you know what, why don't you take the orphan child? Perhaps Allah will bless us through him. So they were a good-hearted couple. Halima radiallahu anha and the husband, very good-hearted couple. Even though they were not introduced to Islam, but they were good people. Because even then, taking care of orphans is a good thing. Right? You're an orphan, taking care of orphans, this is a very good thing, this is a positive thing. So they were a very kind-hearted and good-hearted couple, and they said, you know what, why don't we take this orphan? This is a noble thing. So they took the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Halima radiallahu anha and her husband, they took the Prophet ﷺ, and this is when the miracles began. Right? When they took the Prophet of Allah, the miracles began. They had an old goat that was not giving any kind of milk, that was not giving milk. When the Prophet ﷺ came to them, then the udders of that goat became full. Now the goat is starting to give milk. Right? Now we don't know, in those days, this was a very important thing. A healthy goat is a very important commodity. Right? A healthy animal is a very important commodity. If you were to ask your grandparents that, when they were living, it wasn't as if milk was very common. Right? I remember when I was young, my parents took me to India, and I still remember, I was 5. This was my first time where I went to India. And my parents, I still remember that my grandmother, she would milk a goat. I still remember this distinctly, that she would milk a goat. And this was the only milk that was available at the home. So this was a very big commodity, having a goat that can produce milk, having a cow that can produce milk. So when the Prophet ﷺ came to them, the udders of this old goat became full. And they became astonished at this, because this goat was not giving milk. They had an old mount, which was very slow. A very old mount that was very slow. This was the conveyance in those days, right? It's similar to having, this old mount was similar to having a lemon car today. You buy a car and find out that this car is it's broken. You have to constantly take it to the mechanic. So they had this old mount. When Rasulullah ﷺ came, this old mount that was very slow, it became very fast. This old mount became fast. And generally, this foster care, it lasted for approximately, how many years? 2 years. It lasted for 2 years. And of course there must be an arrangement between Amina and Halima radiallahu anha. So Halima radiallahu anha, she would consult with Amina that, because they would bring the child after a few months to the mother so that the mother can see how everything is going. So of course they must have had some kind of arrangement during these 2 years where Halima, she would bring the Prophet ﷺ to Amina so that Amina could see what kind of progress is being made. I mean, she's a mother after all. Every mother doesn't want to stay too long away from the child. So definitely they must have had some kind of arrangement where Halima radiallahu anha is bringing the Prophet ﷺ to Amina. So in these 2 years, where Rasulullah ﷺ was with Halima's family, with his foster mother, she witnessed many blessings in the household. Many blessings she witnessed while Rasulullah ﷺ was at home. Now, when she witnessed all of these blessings, she was experiencing these blessings. Of course, when you have such a child, you don't want to give up this child, because this child has brought so many khayr, so much khayr, so many goods, so much virtue into your home, so many merits into your home. So she was scared to lose the Prophet ﷺ, Halima. And the normal, customary time was 2 years, and then they would return the child after 2 years. Right? So after the weaning period, and this is normally how long it takes, right? For a mother to wean off her child, approximately 2 years. So she was scared to lose the Prophet ﷺ. She did not want to lose the barakat associated with this child. So she invented excuses to placate Amina. That, let me keep Muhammad. I know he's young, the city has many diseases, it's problematic. So she came up with so many excuses until Amina, she relented and she said, okay, fine. Amina agreed, even though she could not pay. She couldn't pay what other people could pay, but money over here wasn't an issue. It was the blessings Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. This was something that Halima radiallahu anha, she had high regard for. Now, the second phase, so this is the first phase, the first 2 years, right? After which she takes back Muhammad to the desert, and now the second phase of the foster care begins. And this is where Shaqqus Sadr takes place. Right? Shaqqus Sadr takes place during the second phase, where the incision of the heart. And this is mentioned in the Quran as well. Alam nashrah laka sadrak. The scholars, majority of the scholars, they mention that this is directly related to Shaqqus Sadr. And then there are numerous hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the incision that took place, it was still visible. Right? It was still visible. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 4, the story is, and this is authentic hadith, the Sahaba, they saw the incision, and they were witnesses to the operation that took place. And this is mentioned in authentic hadith. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 4 years of age, he was playing with he was playing with children. And during this time, Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came. Now the children all ran, because this is the natural instinct of kids, that you see a stranger, you start crying, stranger danger, and you run off. Right? So all the kids, they did the natural thing, and they ran off. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood his ground. He was a 4-year-old boy, and he stood his ground. Look at the bravery of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that age. At the age of 4, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is displaying bravery at the age of 4. So he stood his ground. Jibreel comes to him, and Jibreel overcomes the Prophet. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is fighting Jibreel until hatta sara'ahu, until Jibreel overcomes this small child, puts him on the floor, lays him on the floor. So Jibreel had to overpower Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because he was fighting back. Right? What kind of child at that age fights back? Right? Other children, they ran. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Jibreel comes, trying to overcome. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is pushing back. Rasulullah sallallahu alaight wasallam is fighting back. Right? Until Jibreel overcame him. After Jibreel overcame him, Jibreel opened his chest. Shaqqa sadrahu. Now what does this mean? How did he open his chest? What kind of equipment, what kind of instruments does he have? We don't know. This is not mentioned. This was the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This had to happen, and it happened. Nonetheless, it is mentioned that shaqqa sadrahu, that an incision was made near his heart. An incision was made near his heart. So Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, he removed the heart, and he took out a black cloth, a black slither, and he threw it away. And he said that هذا حظ الشيطان منك. هذا حظ الشيطان منك. That this is the portion of shaitan within you. This is the portion of shaitan within you. Now, what is the significance of this? It comes in hadith, authentic hadith, that every child is pricked by shaitan. Every child is poked and pricked by shaitan. And this is the reason why kids cry, because they are poked or prodded by shaitan. And this is because of the hatred of shaitan. Shaitan hates insan. Shaitan hates human beings. Because he thought that the khilafah, that to become vicegerent of this earth, was something that he was going to get, that he was going to become the caliph. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave that honor, gave that prestige to who? To human beings, to mankind. So shaitan, from that moment, he hated human beings. So because of his intense dislike, that whenever a human is born, shaitan pokes and prods the human being. So this is the, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but some type of element, when that poking or prodding takes place, it's some type of element that is put by shaitan within that child. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And so the corruption process, it begins not when a person gets old, but from minute 1. When a person is born, the corruption process of shaitan, it begins. Now shaitan, many of us might think that, shaitan has some kind of controllers. Kids, they might think, shaitan has controllers, similar to how, games have controllers. No, it doesn't work like that. Shaitan has no game controller. There's no such thing as game controller. Shaitan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says that people on the day of Qiyamah, they will come and they will blame shaitan, that you are the one. You are the one responsible for inviting us towards wrongdoing and encouraging us to engage in sin. You're the one who is responsible. So shaitan on that day, he's going to exonerate himself. On the day of Qiyamah, he's going to exonerate himself. He's going to free himself from any kind of blame. He will say, مَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ بِسُلْطَانٍ. I had no power over you. I didn't have like a game controller or something that I was controlling you. Right? So, مَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ بِسُلْطَانٍ. That I had no control over you. إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. I used to call you, I used to seduce you, I used to invite you, فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. And you responded to my call. You came to me. Right? So I never had any control over you. You had a choice to do right or wrong. And this is exactly and precisely what makes us human beings. That ability to choose between right and wrong is what makes us humans. And this is exactly when we choose correct, when we have the option to do bad, and when we choose correct, this is where the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lies. Because we have that propensity. We have the propensity to do good or bad. And when we choose for the sake of Allah to do good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us. There is no reward for the angels. Angels don't get any reward because they have not been created with this kind of capacity. Angels have not been created with the ability to choose between right and wrong. So angels receive no reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they have to obey Allah. They have only been created with the ability to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. They've not been created with any other ability. So it doesn't matter to the angels because they can't do wrong. So there is no reward for them. But for human beings, for jinn, who have been created with both the propensity to do good and evil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards them. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards so immensely when a person does good and it's multiplied. Because we're choosing for the sake of Allah. When we have the ability to do wrong, we're choosing for the sake of Allah to do right. This is why our good deeds are multiplied manifold by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So shaitan on that day, when people will blame him, shaitan will exonerate himself. And he will say that no, مَا كَانَ لِي عَلَيْكُمْ بِسُلْطَانٍ. I had no control over you. I had no power over you. I just used to call you and you responded. I seduced you, I called you, you responded. فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't blame me, blame yourself. Don't blame me. This is going to be the response of shaitan when people will point fingers at shaitan. This is in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this in the Quran, that this is what's going to happen. Right? فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. So what this relationship is, what I mentioned about the poking of shaitan. It comes in hadith that shaitan pokes or prods every newborn. So what this means, what the scholars have said over here, that it allows access to devilish whisperings. Devilish whisperings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran as well. And this is something that is mentioned in hadith. That it allows access to shaitanic whisperings. That any kind of blasphemous thought that comes into our mind, this is from shaitan. Or any kind of evil thought, sometimes we might think that, and such an evil thought comes into our head, comes into our mind, at that moment, oh my God, that's really bad. This is very evil. How could I even think something? Not sure if that's happened to anyone, but it has happened, right? Where we just think, oh my God, how can I think something like this? This is from shaitan. This is from the whispers of shaitan. And at that time, what we need to understand is that we should fight it and know that it's from shaitan. And there's different types of shaitan who have their own expertise in certain fields, in certain areas. So there's a shaitan for wudu, right? People who take very long in wudu, they have shukuk, they have shubuhat. That shaitan is called al-walahan. That shaitan is called al-walahan. So this shaitan, his area of expertise is to put doubts in a person's mind. That, have you done wudu? Have you done wudu? Did you wash everything properly? So some people, they have this OCD where they're spending 10, 15, half hour just doing wudu. They're just doing wudu. I mean, it's possible that this is also because of chemical imbalance. I'm sure there's a medical aspect to it. But those people, if there is no medical, if a person is not really diagnosed with any kind of irregularity, then this is from shaitan. This is from shaitan. And at that time, a person should realize that this is what shaitan... And the purpose of this is that ultimately, if a person is constantly doing wudu, his salah is going to become qada. When the salah becomes qada, a person will just, say, you know what, I don't even want to pray. I don't want to pray. I don't want to do anything. A person gets tired. Same thing with the salah. A person becomes exasperated that, oh my God, how many rakats did I do? Did I do 1? Did I do 2? Did I do 3? 4? How many did I do? And a person ultimately becomes exasperated. This too is from shaitan. This is shaitanic whisperings that when a person is unfocused and when a person is not paying attention in the salah, this too is from shaitanic whisperings where we don't know the number of rakats. And the whole objective behind this is that we become exasperated and we think that, you know what, I don't even want to worship because it's just too hard. I can't do it because this is a hardship. So we should understand, we should fight these whisperings from shaitan, and we should understand that these whisperings are from shaitan. Now, the relationship between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Halima. We know that Halima radiallahu anha, after this incident, she returned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Aminah. But before this, I just wanted to mention that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that every child that is born, shaitan assigns a qareen to that child. A qareen is someone who is close, someone who is your double, someone who is constantly shadowing you. So we all have a qareen, and the qareen knows us better than our own mother, father, our own family members. This qareen is shaitan. So shaitan appoints, any child that is born, shaitan appoints a qareen. Okay, your job is to whisper into this child's ear, misguide this child. Okay? So the job of this qareen, this shaitan, is to whisper bad things. This is mentioned in the Quran. Okay? But look at the hatred of the shaitan and the cohorts of shaitan, that they despise human beings so much that they have a whole plan. This is a whole plan from shaitan that we need to do as much as possible in this world so that we can take many people down with us. Right? So it's kind of like a person on his last legs. A person in war on his last legs. Let me take as many people with me. I'm going down, so I'm going to take everybody down with me. So this is how shaitan operates. I'm going to Jahannam. I'm destined for Jahannam. Let me take as many down. So this is the job of shaitan. Spent his whole lives. The shaitan spends their entire life to misguide human beings. Why? Because jealousy, hatred, these were the two qualities of shaitan that led him to become matlub, that distant from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That shaitan became matlub because of jealousy, hatred. When Adam alayhi salam was created, shaitan, he was disgusted. That how is it that someone like this is going to be the vicegerent, the Caliph of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth? So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose you? Why didn't He choose me? This is what shaitan is constantly thinking. So he has this hatred, he has this jealousy. When the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this hadith that every human being is assigned a qareen by shaitan, the Sahaba, they inquired that, Ya Rasulullah, wa anta? That even you, O Prophet ﷺ? Rasulullah ﷺ said that even me. I too, there is a qareen appointed. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has helped me, and my qareen has accepted Islam, and now this qareen, he only whispers good things. This qareen only whispers good things. Now, we know that Jibreel alayhi salam washed the heart of the Prophet ﷺ in a gold vessel, and with Zamzam. Zamzam, there are many minerals associated with Zamzam. So Zamzam is a very special type of water, and there are many minerals associated with Zamzam. So Jibreel alayhi salam, when the first shaqqu sadr took place, when the first incision took place, Jibreel alayhi salam washed the heart of the Prophet in a gold vessel with zamzam. So this was the first open heart surgery. And the first open heart surgery, one can say, was performed by Jibreel alayhi salam. And this was a physical thing. It was not something spiritual. This was a very physical thing, meaning taking out the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think we'll just break for now. If people need to do wudu or freshen up, inshallah, they could do that. And we'll resume after Isha, inshallah. As I was discussing the promptings of shaitan and how each child is pricked by shaitan, and this was just to expound on when Jibreel alayhi salam, when he performed the shaqqu sadr, the incision of the heart, and he took out a black clot and said, "Hada hazlu shaitan mink." So what exactly does this clot of black blood mean? What does it constitute? So I elaborated on the prick or the prodding of shaitan. And Jibreel alayhi salam, after removing that black clot, he washed the heart in a gold vessel and washed it with zamzam water. So this was the first heart surgery that was performed by Jibreel. This was a physical thing, i.e. taking out the heart. And when he was playing with children, he was playing with his foster brother and sister, Shema. When they see this, they look at this, and of course this is a spectacle that is horrifying. I mean, imagine a strange person coming, wrestling you down, and opening your heart. I mean, this is horrific for any child. So they see this and they run. They run home and they're crying to their mother, Halima, that our brother has died. Somebody has abducted him, he's died. So Halima, radiallahu anha, she comes running out, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sitting up, and his face is completely pale. His face is pale. But he's not crying. I mean, a child in that kind of situation would be crying. But again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam displays his bravery. That yes, he was shaken, and he was most likely terror-struck, but his feelings were bottled. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a very brave man, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even from a young age. So this was quite possibly the bravest 4-year-old ever in history. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that a strange person comes and wrestles you to the ground and then performs an incision on your chest. They see him, and the line of the operation is visible. Halima radiallahu anha sees, and the foster brother and sister of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also witnessed this. Anas radiallahu anhu, in a hadith, Anas radiallahu anhu was one of the young Sahaba. Right? So he says that I could see the incision where the shaqqu sadr took place of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anas bin Malik, who served the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 10 years. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have hidden the line. Right? This is within the capacity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to know that this was a physical thing. That the taking out of the heart was a physical thing. And the spiritual aspect was removing that black clot. This was a spiritual aspect. So this operation, this took place when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 4, and then another took place prior to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam going on to Isra and Mi'raj. This I'm going to elaborate on it when we get there. So this was approximately after 45 years. So after 45 years, another operation takes place. Did the exact same thing, but there was no black clot to remove. Right? The exact same thing was done, but no black clot. So this incident, of course, it would concern any mother, so it concerned Halima, and she was very concerned, so she immediately returns the child to Amina. She returns Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Amina. Again, this was a spiritual cleansing, but it was physically done, and Allah mentions this in the Quran. Alam nashrah laka sadra. The whole surah, majority of the scholars, they hold the opinion, and this is the majority opinion, that this is referring to shaqqu sadr, the incision that took place in the time of the Prophet, in the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was young. So, about 53 years after, the Battle of Hunayn takes place. The Battle of Hunayn takes place. And in this battle, this tribe that fostered the Prophet ﷺ, this tribe accepts Islam. They're conquered. They accept Islam. Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr, the tribe of Halima. And one of the prisoners who was captured was the sister of the Prophet ﷺ, rather the foster sister. And she makes this da'wah, she makes this claim that I am the sister of your Prophet. So the Sahaba, they're perturbed. What? What are you talking about? So they didn't know what to do. So of course they take this woman to the Prophet ﷺ. And Rasulullah ﷺ knows that he has a sister. So this woman is brought to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ asks that, how do I know that you're my sister? Give me some kind of sign that only you know and I know. You tell me, how are you my sister? Rasulullah of course knows that he does have a sister, but he wants to know with certainty that, is this indeed my sister? So she said that I still have the marks of when you bit me when I was carrying you on my back. I still have those marks. And when you bit me when I was carrying you on, because she was older than the Prophet. She was about 7-8 years old. So she, tells the Prophet ﷺ of an incident that only the Prophet ﷺ is privy to and only the Prophet ﷺ knows. Now, Halima and her husband, they come after the battle. Right? So this is after the battle and after the tribe of Halima Sa'diyah. After they accepted Islam, Halima and her husband, they come after the battle, and Rasulullah ﷺ sees her, recognizes her that this is my foster mother. So he immediately gets up in her honor, takes off his rida, takes off his shawl, and he places it on the ground. And he says that this is my mother, and he has her sit on the shawl. She accepts Islam, and Rasulullah ﷺ sent her away with many gifts. This was the foster mother of Rasulullah ﷺ, Hazrat Halima. Now back to Amina, Rasulullah ﷺ living with Amina after the age of 4. So Halima takes back the Prophet ﷺ to Amina. We don't have many details, so we don't know what kind of tarbiyah Hazrat Amina was giving to the Prophet, how Amina was raising the Prophet ﷺ. Only one thing is mentioned. Everything else, there is no authenticity. So only one thing is mentioned, that she decides to take the son, Muhammad ﷺ, to Yathrib. And this was ultimately the place that he would migrate to. So this is the divine wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that the Prophet of Allah was taken to Yathrib. Why Yathrib? Why did Amina take the Prophet ﷺ to Yathrib? Because the great grandmother of the Prophet of Allah was there. And in those days, you know that this was a lawless area. This was a completely lawless area. There was no such thing as government or law or anything along those lines. So then what do you need? You need the power of your tribe. You need your family members. So Amina took the Prophet ﷺ to introduce him to his family members. So this was how they would protect themselves. This was how people would protect themselves. They would protect themselves with their tribes, with their respective tribes. That this is this tribe and this is that tribe. This is how they protected themselves, because this was a lawless land. This was a land without any kind of government. Now Amina, she and the Prophet ﷺ, they have a servant that was given to them by Abdul Muttalib. On the wedding of Abdullah and Amina, Abdul Muttalib gave a servant by the name of Ayman. Ayman. She accompanies Amina and the Prophet ﷺ. She accompanies Amina and the Prophet ﷺ. Now Ayman, she lived up to the time of Abu Bakr. She passed away in the caliphate of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So she lived a very long time. It's astonishing that no one bothered to ask Ayman, because she was with Amina and Abdullah right from the beginning. But I find it surprising that no Sahaba, no one asked Ayman about the upbringing of Rasulullah ﷺ during his young age, because she was there. She witnessed everything. but we see no narration from her. There is no narration mentioned. So nobody chronicled her stories, or nobody bothered to ask her. Perhaps they did, but it didn't reach us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Now, on the way back from Medina, after introducing the Prophet ﷺ to the relatives, on the way back, she falls ill in a place called Al-Abwa. This place still exists, right, on a place. So this area is called Al-Abwa. She fell ill, she passed away over there. Ayman, just with a small town, Ayman buries her with a few other people, and then takes the Prophet ﷺ back to Makkah. Returns with the Prophet ﷺ to Makkah. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, once he was coming back from an expedition, from one of the Ghazawat or Saraya, and he takes a path. The Sahaba are with him. He takes a path very much different than the path that is normally taken. Of course, there are paths in those days. It isn't as if there aren't any roads. There are roads, of course, not the roads that we see today, but there are roads. So the Prophet ﷺ takes a different path. The Sahaba, they followed until the Prophet of Allah came to a grave. And the Prophet ﷺ, he sat down and he cried until his beard became wet with tears. So the Prophet of Allah, he had a very lihyatul gatha, a very, very thick beard. So he kept crying until his beard was all wet with tears. He never cried like that before. Publicly, very few times he cried like that. This was one such occasion. Another occasion was when his son passed away, when his son Ibrahim passed away. The Sahaba, they saw this, they didn't ask any questions. During this entire time, no question was asked, Ya Rasulullah, where are you going? Where are you taking us? They never asked any question. They followed. They were assiduous when it came to following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Sahaba, they witnessed this. They started crying with him. But they never asked Rasulullah ﷺ anything until the Prophet himself spoke. So the Prophet ﷺ explained that I prohibited you from visiting graves. And this was something that was prohibited. So, and the reason for this prohibition was that people would go to these graves and they would do noha. They would do something called noha. What is noha? Noha means, they would wail and cry and do unusual things at the grave. So Rasulullah ﷺ, he prohibited people from visiting graves. So he said that I prohibited you from visiting graves, but I sought the permission to visit my mother's grave by Allah's leave. This is a clear, authentic hadith where whatever Rasulullah ﷺ does, he does with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He takes the leave of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me. So Allah allowed me to visit the grave of my mother. So of course, the Prophet of Allah, he was 6 years old. There must be some memories that he had, the time that he spent with his mother. There definitely must be some memories. So he was quite possibly remembering that, and because of this he was crying that this is my mother. There are other stories mentioned of Amina, but these are not authentic. These are not authentic. Now we know that after Amina passed, he was entrusted to Abdul Muttalib. But again, not enough stories in the classical works even related to Abdul Muttalib. One such story that is mentioned, and this is authentic story or semi-authentic, and it pertains to Seerah, so it can be mentioned. So Abdul Muttalib had he was the chief after all, so he had a raised platform that connected to the Kaaba, to Baytullah. And he was the only person permitted to sit on this platform. He was the chief. Right? He was the star of the Quraysh. So he was the only person permitted to sit on this platform. So once Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comes running and he jumps onto this platform. And the sons of Abdul Muttalib, the uncles of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they made motions to take Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam down from that platform, because this was unheard of that anyone would sit with Abdul Muttalib. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sat with Abdul Muttalib. And Abdul Muttalib immediately, he said that leave him, let him be. Right? Let him be. And this comes in the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. It comes in the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd, that let him be, leave him alone. This is my son. This is my son. So he allows Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to sit with him on this platform. Now the other thing is that once some camels were lost of Abdul Muttalib. Camels, this was a very precious commodity, and the uncles of the Prophet, so Abdul Muttalib's sons, they sent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to look for them. Why? because whatever he did, it was successful. Whatever he did, it was always successful. And they themselves witnessed many blessings. And this again comes in the tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd. Abdul Muttalib, he finds out because Rasulullah has taken a very long time from returning. So Abdul Muttalib, he finds out, he's upset, and he tells his sons off that, why did you send them? What's wrong with you? Right? And then Rasulullah returns with the camels. And then Abdul Muttalib tells the Prophet that I will not let you out of my sight. So there was a special connection between Abdul Muttalib and the Prophet ﷺ. Now at the age of 8, Abdul Muttalib, he passes away. He's very old, he dies blind. He becomes blind in his old age, so he dies without sight. Abdul Muttalib. So Abdul Muttalib, in trust on his deathbed, he entrusted the Prophet ﷺ to Abu Talib. Abu Talib was the full brother of Abdullah. The Prophet of Allah had other uncles, they were half uncles. Hamza, radiallahu anh, he was the half uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Lahab, he was the half uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Talib was the full brother of the Prophet's father, Abdullah. Now question, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjected the Prophet ﷺ to so many trials, so many tribulations? So the scholars, they've given various responses to this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about Musa alayhi salam, وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي, that I myself have raised you, I myself have nurtured you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken the responsibility of the prophets, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself nurtures the prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala develops them. So if Musa alayhi salam was developed and nurtured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it stands to reason that the Prophet too, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was nurtured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another wisdom is that being an orphan, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an orphan, right? Before he was born. He was an orphan again when Amina passed, an orphan again when Abdul Muttalib passed. So he was an orphan. Now being an orphan, it gives a person many qualities. It gives maturity, it gives compassion, it gives empathy. If we look at the children that are born pampered versus the children born in hardship, there's stark contrast. When I was in Michigan, I used to go to this Amish farm. It was about 90 miles away. And I saw young kids, subhanAllah, young kids just working on the farm. 5, 6 years old, just working on the farm with their parents. There were 5, 6 kids, and they're working on the farm without any kind of complaint. And they're working throughout the entire day. One day I went there for Eid al-Adha to slaughter an animal, and I see that all of these small kids, they're hard at work. And they're very young kids. One of them has a small little pony, and he's tilling the ground. And I'm just looking, I'm just surprised that, we don't entrust our 6-year-old kids with anything, but here's a 5, 6-year-old kid, and he's performing farm chores. 5, 6-year-old kid. So the kids that are pampered versus the kids that are born in hardship, there's a great difference between them. In our countries, it's possible that a 6-year-old kid is taking care of babies that are just born, and we may have seen this because they're living in that type of environment. They're living in a very hard environment. So, and the parents need to work. Both parents need to work. The mother needs to work. The father needs to work. So it's the younger kids who are taking care of the children, who are taking care of the babies. So we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he has this maturity, he has this compassion, he has this empathy, and then there are numerous narrations. Right? He's living in this kind of environment, right, where he's constantly surrounded by hardship. He's constantly faced with different types of hardship. So he becomes very, very sensitive. And again, as I was speaking about one of my friends who studied in Mauritania, another friend of mine who was studying in Mauritania. So in Mauritania, people live in tents, close to one another. And they have to trek far distances to get water. So, a friend of mine from the States, right? Now we have this concept of ownership, right? That we own whatever we have. So they had to trek far distances for water. So he would go to this well and he would get water. Now it was the custom of the desert that when it comes to water, they would just go into each other's tents and take water if it was available, so that they can avoid making a long trip and getting water. So they just, my friend was studying, and these people, they would come in and they would just take his water, and then he would tell them, no, this is my water. So then they would laugh at him. What do you mean it's your water? There's no concept of ownership in the desert. We all help each other. And this is how it was. And this is how it still is in Mauritania. This is a story probably 2-3 years old. I heard it from a close friend of mine who studied there, who's now an imam. Well, he was an imam. Now he's a teacher in Chicago. So no concept of ownership in the desert. So we have incidents like this even today. So, and there are narrations from the Rasulullah ﷺ was an orphan. So there are numerous narrations where the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned the virtues of taking care of orphans. Ana wa kafil yatim kahatain yawm al-qiyamah. That I and the person who takes care of an orphan will be like this on the day of Qiyamah. That we will be close. And the person who touches or who rubs the head, who wipes the head, who rubs the head of an orphan with compassion, then there's so many virtues just associated with that. These experiences made Rasulullah ﷺ sensitive to the weak people. And we see that throughout his life, he was very sensitive to anybody who is weak, anybody who is experiencing hardship, anybody who is experiencing different types of tribulations. The Prophet of Allah was very sensitive to them. Banu Sa'ad made him very fasih. His tribe, where he was taken care of by his foster mother, made him fasih, made him an amazing linguist in the Arabic language, to the extent that he himself would say, "Utitu jawami al-kalim," that I have been given the comprehensive statements. That with a few words, the Prophet of Allah was able to convey volumes of knowledge, right? Oceans of knowledge in a few words. And this was something that was specific to the Prophet ﷺ. The last story that I want to mention, and I want to go into some academic detail. It's going to take me about 5 minutes, inshallah. So the last story is the Syria expedition. And this is mentioned in Tirmidhi as well, to some degree. So we need to go into this in academic detail. The Prophet of Allah, when he was young, approximately 10 years of age, he passed by a monastery with his uncle. Right? Everybody has heard of this story. And the monk who never would give anybody the time of day, this monk's name was what? Buhaira, right? Now, once this monk, he sees during when the Prophet of Allah with Abu Talib goes to Syria, this monk, Buhaira, sees the Prophet and he invites them in for the first time. Now this is a person who never gave anybody the time of day. He had his own monastery, he was doing whatever he was doing. So he sees that, he mentions to Abu Talib that, is there somebody over here that is a prophet? There's nobody, just my nephew. This is the only person. He says that I saw clouds shading him and everybody is doing sujood to him. Right? The trees are doing sujood, the rocks are doing sujood, everybody is doing sujood, everything is doing sujood, everybody is falling in prostration, meaning all the things that are falling in prostration, and the clouds are shading him. Eventually what happens is that some soldiers who are Romans, they come. And this is mentioned in Ibn Ishaq. So Buhaira hides them because they're looking for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They apparently, this comes to their attention that a prophet will ultimately travel to this area and we should kill him before he comes of age. And again, this is mentioned in Ibn Ishaq. This is a problematic story, a very problematic story for a number of reasons. So the Imam Dhahabi, who was a 7th century scholar, he was like the Wikipedia of that era. As a matter of fact, he's probably the Wikipedia of Islam. A very great mu'arrikh, a very great historian, a very great muhaddith. Right? So the difference between him and Wikipedia is that his information was always right. Right? Imam Dhahabi was the student of Ibn Taymiyyah. So he critiqued the story by saying that when the Prophet of Allah was inviting Abu Talib towards Islam, why didn't he mention that story? Right? Why didn't he mention that story? Because he was there. So why didn't he mention this story? And why didn't the Prophet ﷺ know of this story when Jibreel came to him in the cave of Hira? Why didn't he tell Jibreel that, oh Jibreel, I've been waiting for you for the last 30-something years. You know, what took you so long? Right? So why is the Prophet ﷺ confused when he goes to Khadija? That, what happened? Who is this? Right? Because he heard all of this. He was old enough to hear all of these things. So there are many problems associated with this story. The problem, and the Western Orientalists who have researched Islam, they spend a lot of time on Islam, they when they speak about the elaborate details that the Quran gives about Christianity and Judaism, right, they're unable to. They're unable to provide a rational and cogent explanation. So what do? They find this story, and this is like the missing link for them. It's like they found the missing link in evolution, right? And they're like, oh yeah, this is where the Prophet ﷺ got his information from. That from Buhaira, the monk. He got his information of Judaism and Christianity. How can a 10-year-old child get elaborate details? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is mentioning that these are things, مَا كُنْتَ تَعْلَمُهَا. You never knew of these things. These are things from the ghaib. Right? These stories of the past, these are things that are mentioned by Allah to the Prophet ﷺ. So elaborate stories about Judaism, Christians, and whatever happened in the past, Rasulullah ﷺ was recounting them. And people are just astonished. But of course, Orientalists today, they think, oh yeah, this was learned, the Prophet of Allah learned this from Buhaira the monk when he was, what, 10? Are you kidding me? At the age of 10? So Orientalists, of course, they can't explain that how Rasulullah ﷺ received this elaborate information. We know that this is from ghaib, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent these verses to the Prophet ﷺ, and this is how Rasulullah ﷺ. So unfortunately, you'll find many fabrications in works of Seerah. And this is how it is. When it comes to works of hadith, so there's two types of works. There are works that are associated with ahkam, rules, laws, tenets, right? Where the scholars were very stringent in selecting the hadith. Right? This is something that I trained in. And there are compilations. The genre of Seerah is the genre where the scholars, they will include all types of hadith. They will include all types of hadith. Weak, authentic, every type of hadith. So you have to really scrutinize the books of Seerah to make sure that it is in fact authentic. This is not the case in the books of hadith that we normally hear about, like Muwatta, Bukhari, Muslim, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, Muslim, Ahmad, Darimi, Sahih ibn Khuzaymah, Sahih ibn Hibban, Mustadrak Hakim, and so on and so forth. These are books that the scholars, they would be a little bit more stringent than those who wrote on the genre of Seerah. This is a totally different genre. The genre of Seerah is totally different. Right? And the genre of hadith compilation is totally different. They're both hadith, but in Seerah they were a little bit more lax, probably a degree less than those who wrote on Seerah. So you'll find many fabrications in Seerah and throughout these types of books. And this is possibly because in Seerah there are many emotions attached, right? Because this is the Prophet ﷺ, and we're talking about his life. People discuss the shadow of the Prophet. Did the Prophet ﷺ have a shadow? Right? Things like this, things of this nature. You don't really need to discuss these things. I mean, there's an entire corpus of authentic narrations that portray the Prophet ﷺ in an amazing light. We don't need to resort to fabrications, weak hadith, or anything of that sort. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the ability to bring the sunnah and imbibe it into our life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the understanding of the seerah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq and ability to put everything that we learned into practice. Alhamdulillah.